I think when we have the time, we'd like to, share the recordings of these meetings online so that people who aren't able to join us can access the information that we've been that we present here today. So today, our two big topics are purpose and need and public involvement. And then we've got some other little things to talk about. So Patrick, did I cover everything for the intros? Anything you want to add right now?
No, great job, Anthony. Thanks. No, I think that's it. We will be, I'll just echo about the chats. We'll be monitoring the chat, so feel free to post questions, comments. We'll get to them, and we look forward to a good discussion.
All right, great. Thanks, Patrick. Mary, I think if you have anything to add on the intro or you just want to jump right in, I think you're the first up on the list here.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I'll jump right in. I will start sharing my screen here so we can look at some notes, and I will post these notes also in the chat box afterwards too. It's a PDF document, so you should be able to download it there if you'd like it for future reference. So, sorry, I'm Mary Kennedy with INDOT's Cultural Resources Office, and I am the Historic Bridge Specialist. Review a few other projects along the way, but primarily on a day-to-day basis, I'm dealing with historic bridges, both LPA and INDOT bridges. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today is just some highlights, tips, and pointers for purpose and need. Obviously, it's a pretty intense topic that can take a lot of time, and we do have training sessions we offer through Federal Highway frequently, and that's a day-long session, and so there's a lot of information that we could go into in purpose and need, but we just wanted to kind of do some common things that we see and some tips and pointers, and we encourage you to take the training if you haven't before the next time it's offered, but here's just a little overview and some highlights. And so we're going to kind of focus on historic bridges to start off, because that is what I'm dealing with day to day, and it's one type of project that we look at the purpose and need in the Cultural Resources Office a little more closely than some other projects sometimes because of the nature of the project. But everything I'm going to talk about, the general principles and thoughts related to behind the purpose and need, really do apply to any type of project. I'm just kind of focusing in first on historic bridges, and then I think Anthony and Brandon will kind of talk a little bit more about projects in general. And so the reason that we do look at purpose and need a little more closely in cultural resources is because of the historic bridge alternatives analysis document that we review. And that is an interdisciplinary review that we do with the bridge staff, so they can provide that expertise from an engineering and technical perspective, and the NEPA staff reviews it as well to provide that general overall environmental perspective. And we really want the purpose and need to be something that in the HBAA we develop that can be used throughout the life of the project, and really have a solid purpose and need at that point. Some of the common issues that we see are not justifying the need in detail or fully, just generally saying we have safety issues, we have a bridge that's in really bad shape, and not providing specific details, specific data, just too broad sweeping statements. Some issues with the purpose is having a predetermined prescribed outcome stated in the purpose. We want, the purpose of the project is to replace the bridge. The purpose of the project is to construct a roundabout. The purpose of the project is to install a trail. That may be ultimately the alternative that is selected, but in the purpose, we just want to state what the goal of the project is to address what issues are there. We do not want to prescribe a certain outcome or choose our alternative in that purpose statement. Conversely, sometimes it's very broad and general and not specific in saying we want to meet all current design standards with this project. And That's problematic because right now we have lots of roadways and bridges that don't meet all current design standards. We're not programming a project for them. They're operating fine in that instance. And so we need to look at what's the specific issue here that we need to address. Some overall pointers just when constructing the purpose and need. Even though it says purpose and need, we do find that stating the needs first, it makes it flow a little bit better. This is in line with federal highway guidance and how to construct it. It just kind of makes sense to outline, here's what the issues are, here's what our needs are, and then go into what the goals are. Not really sure how the title kind of got flipped in what makes sense of actually presenting the data, but we do find that describing the need first makes a little more sense in the flow of documents. If you have lots of items, lots of data to present, consider adding bullet points to help organize it. It's especially helpful to match up specific goals with the needs of the project. We would caution you from using numbers or letters when you do this, because that implies a hierarchy or a priority to the issues outlined, and that may not be the case, so just using general bullet points is good. We want to use terms that we can measure, criteria that we can measure. We want to know measurable outcomes that we're looking for. Otherwise, how can we judge if the project was successful or not? For example, saying there's a lot of congestion here, we want to reduce that congestion. We need to put that in terms of something measurable. Maybe you're going to look at what's level of service before and what's our goal for level of service. Something that we can measure and look at afterwards and say, yep, we met that. We did what the project was intending to do. Avoiding fluff language, extra things that might sound good but has no measurable meaning and can't be used for comparison is something we want to avoid. Saying a project is going to bring economic vitality to this area. How do we measure that? It sounds good. I mean, who doesn't want economic vitality? But we want to focus in on the needs and the issues relate to the transportation system and that are measurable, specific items. Try not to confuse the situation by including things that aren't relevant to what we're discussing for the project needs. In general, just being concise, succinct, and focused is the goal. When we're looking at need, this is a little more specific here to bridges, but we want to look at the conditions that are necessitating the project. And for bridges, we have a lot of information and a lot of data that's easily available there through the MBI information, through those inspections that are occurring at least every 2 years. We know what the condition of the bridge is. We know if things are rated fair or poor. We can see over time that they're deteriorating and the rating's going down. And that's the specific information that we should be citing in the needs. We also may have specific deficiencies that are resulting in restrictions, with the bridge being load posted, the bridge being closed. That's an obvious need to get it open and operational again. If we're talking about more along the lines of safety and accidents or incidents, we want that supported with data. Saying that a bridge has a little bit less than the desired overhead clearance and it was struck once in 50 years is a lot different than a bridge that has been struck every week for the past year. We want that data to show that, yes, this is an actual need, not just somebody messed up one time and hit the bridge. Do we have an actual problem here that's backed up with the supporting data? Again, we don't want to be too broad and just say it doesn't meet the current guidelines and standards. It's already operating at that situation. And again, we have lots of roads and bridges that aren't at those current standards and guidelines and maybe just fine, and we're not proposing a project for them. When we're looking at the purpose, it doesn't have to be all-encompassing. Sometimes it feels like in order to justify a project, people want to list out every possible thing that they would want to try to do, just a long kitchen sink type approach. And we really want to focus in on what's the issue. If we have a specific need, we can have a specific purpose that matches up to that. It does not have to be all encompassing. We want to articulate what the project's primary objective is. Again, it should be definable, measurable, and we don't want broad statements of we need to meet all the current guidelines and standards. Design exceptions can be attainable. In many instances, it's perfectly reasonable to get a design exception. Here we have a couple of examples to show. So in this example, we have a deteriorated bridge, cracking, spalling, so a little bit of description of that. And of course, this is in a document that previously in the document in HBAA, it's going to be going through all those specific conditions. But we're looking at the rating of it. It's rated fair and it's rated poor. So we want to bring those up. And so then we have the goal, we're setting a goal of we want everything to be good. And we want to extend the overall life of the bridge by 25 years because that's our goal through the Historic Bridges Programmatic Agreement, that the owner needs to maintain a bridge with a rehab for a minimum of 25 years. So they also mentioned sufficiency rating here. And we just want to kind of state that that's not, that we're kind of moving away from using that as a reason or as a justification for the project. There's a lot of different components that go into the sufficiency rating. And so just saying that it's rated X out of 100 doesn't necessarily tell us what the problems with the bridge are. There are many different factors that go into that sufficiency rating. So in this case, in these examples that we're showing, it's just kind of reiterating that there's a problem. They do show here this item's rated fair and this item's rated poor. Additionally, this sufficiency rating is kind of low. Should not be the main justification or driver for a project. So we just want to state that we're kind of moving away from that, but it is shown in some of the examples here. So in this one, again, we have a superstructure that's in poor condition, has some things that are kind of contributing to that. We're again citing that rating of 4, and then again wanting to get to a good condition and get to a 7 is the goal of the project. So then in this example, the bridge is closed. So that's an obvious need there that it's not operational, it's closed right now. Additionally, all the ratings are serious. And also, in this particular instance, before it was closed, it was also load posted. So it was not allowing certain types of traffic to go across. So then our goal, we want to look at improving all those ratings and then also be looking at what's the minimum capacity that we want to reach per the design manual. So we'll just make a note for when we're looking at a specific standard like that we want to meet per the design manual. We want to make sure that you're looking at the right part of the design manual and referencing the right section for the classification of roadway that it is. And making sure that for low volume roads, we're looking at the low volume standards, which are going to be different than the other parts of the design manual, and make sure that we're referencing the correct ones when we're trying to reach our goals. Just some miscellaneous notes. Reviewing the purpose and need ahead of submitting the whole HBAA can be done. If that's something you want to do, just let us know. Sometimes that has come out of when we have a field check, kind of discussing the various goals and kind of having some questions and discussion about it and saying, well, you know, why don't you go ahead and submit that purpose and need? We can take a look and get input on that because so many components of the HBAA rely on that purpose and need for filtering out and analyzing the alternatives. We do want to make sure that that's a solid component of it. So if it's kind of complex or you have questions, you know, we can talk about that ahead of submitting the entire document. I will note also, in looking at the HBAA template, when you look at the example of a purpose and need that we have there, you may say, well, it doesn't quite go with this guidance and some of the pointers that you're giving us today. We do acknowledge that we want to revisit that HBAA template within the next year and just kind of say, okay, we've been using it for about 8 years now. What are the common things that we see that we can kind of look at the template and provide refinement and clarification I think our goal in providing that example at that time was just trying to steer people away from the goal is to replace the bridge type of purpose and need. So it may not be the best example in there. We realize that we're going to be working on updating this template. Don't see any drastic changes coming out as a result of this. It's just more providing some refinement, some clarifications, just helping make our guidance through that template a little bit better now that we've been working with it and using it for several years. So that's kind of all I had for the notes. I guess we can see if some questions popped up in the chat.
No questions that I see in the chat so far.
Okay.
Does anybody want to raise their hand and ask a question?
And I will go ahead and place those notes in there. So if anybody wants them for reference. So I guess if that's all for bridges, if, I guess turn it over to Anthony and Brandon just to kind of talk about purpose and need in general.
Sure, and let me just jump in here. We've been having some technical difficulties. I think a lot of people were unable to join early on, so I've been working on that. So I'm gonna let Brandon handle this conversation right now, primarily. If you're there, Brandon, while we work on this.
Hey, Anthony, real quick. Cinder Miller had her hand raised. Cinder, did you have a question or comment?
Nothing that's really important, just to say that you might not have any comments because it's also saying we can't send messages because we're not part of the chat. So if there's nothing showing up in the chats, that might be why.
Okay. Yeah, I see some people can chat, but yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, thanks. All right, I'd say we move on then.
Okay.
I'll keep working on this behind the scenes.
I'll go ahead and give myself an introduction. My name's Brandon Miller. I'm with the INDOT Environmental Policy Office. I'm with the Document Review Unit. I'm the team lead. We deal with the NEPA documents, so the CEs and EAs and EISs that come in. We do quite a bit with LPA projects and the higher level state projects. The lower level ones end up being out mostly at the district. So I'm here basically. Anthony asked me if I could participate because I'm also the reviewer for the on the NEPA side when the historic bridge alternative analyses come in, and I also help CRO when there's a question about a purpose and need. And so I thought I would go through a few of the items that usually come up and just give a brief overview of where we see purpose and need from a NEPA standpoint, where it falls into CRO, what the realities of that is, and kind of things to watch out for, somewhat like how Mary had it. So purpose and need is something that actually it should be created at the start of the project. And so whenever a project is getting programmed, usually there's a reason behind it. Whether or not it's completely fleshed out into some sort of actual statement saying, hey, this is what our project is, or this is the reason why we're doing that. Usually it isn't all that fleshed out at that point. A lot of the trainings that we had last year that were open partly to the consultants and also to other individuals within INDOT was to try and get some of that done a little bit sooner. So in the NEPA process, the group that usually runs into it the first is CRO. And so they'll get a purpose and need statement or idea behind a purpose and need, and they will be working in the the early coordination letter saying, hey, this is kind of the reasons why we're doing the project. And so that gives an idea of for the other consulting parties as to why we're even talking about the area. And so we usually get involved when Anthony or one of the other reviewers within CRO is reviewing a document and it doesn't seem like something matches up. So for example, we had a project where it was programmed as a road rehab and they were talking about traffic flow and congestion. And so it didn't make sense as to what was going on, and trying to work through and figure out what exactly is it that we're trying to give to the community. One big thing with the purpose and need, it doesn't get finalized until basically the environmental document is finalized. So people think, oh, I got this done right here, it should be sufficient for everything else. There's always time to refine it up until you get to the end. Sometimes there isn't the information to be given. So for example, with the road rehab, maybe you don't have, maybe they're planning on going out and getting some data on Pazer data to figure out smoothness. Maybe they're not. Maybe you're waiting on a little bit of information to more define something. And so what the big thing with CRO is making certain you're not setting yourself up that you have to walk backwards when you're in NEPA. In the CRO process, you could be a little bit more vague, but just be aware that as you're trying to refine it over time, there may be additional comments during the NEPA process. Since we look at purpose and needs pretty sufficiently in the HVAA process, we try not to make major changes unless it's like a single word here or there where apparently it was missed previously. But usually it's not something that changes the overall project. Is there anything that I missed, Anthony, that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I apologize. I was still kind of working on troubleshooting some of the technical difficulties we've been having. Of course, the first brown bag went off pretty much without a hitch, and so our luck was too good, and now we had a huge bunch of people waiting in the waiting room, but we did not, for whatever reason, they weren't showing up for us. So, but I think we've sent out an email and hopefully fix that issue, at least for now. We apologize about the chat issue. I don't know that Cinder that you pointed out. We're not sure about that, but one thing at a time. Okay, yeah, so purpose and need. I think, one of the key points that you raised, Brandon, about purpose and need is that, it's not final until it comes to you guys and you review it and approve it. But for us in CRO, that doesn't mean it gets a free pass, right? We need it to be fundamentally sound. And so if the purpose and need says that the purpose of this project is to ... insert preferred alternative, well, that's going to be a problem. And it's a bigger problem when it's a historic bridge, when you say the purpose of this project is to replace a bridge. But still, fundamentally, if you just say the purpose of this project is to replace the sidewalks, I mean, that's not an appropriate purpose under NEPA. The purpose has to identify the larger transportation goal that you're trying to achieve. And then another common issue that we find is that the purpose is overly broad. Another issue that's been talked about, economic development, or you might have a trail project that is part of a much larger trail network throughout your whole county, or and this is an important link. That's great, and I think that's important. But if you then say, you know, the purpose of this project is to provide pedestrian connectivity throughout the entire county, well, that's not accurate, right? Because you're not really doing that. You know, you have to zero in and explain why this particular project, you know, what is the purpose of that particular project? So that's an important issue. You know, overall, we're not, sorry, I just muted everyone. So if you can make sure to try to remember to mute yourselves, that would be great. When you want to speak, of course, unmute yourself. Another issue that we have is the level of detail. You know, and at our stage, when we're reviewing an ECL, for instance, we don't need very much detail. We just need the fundamentals to be sound on the purpose and need. As the process is developed further, you know, more details will hopefully be brought forward, and we don't want to hold up the 106 process at that point to get, you know, a detailed data necessarily. I mean, it depends on what kind of project you're talking about. If it's a big project and it's headed down into some, you know, important issues, maybe it has a 4F or something like that, then yeah, we need to really be working on a more detailed purpose and need early on. But in general, you know, we don't necessarily need a lot of detail. But if you start giving us details, then that might make us review those details and we might have questions about it. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. Yeah, and I think that kind of covers the main points that I wanted to talk about. I'm not sure, Patrick, do you have things to add on in terms of CRO, how CRO approaches reviewing purpose and need?
Yeah, I think no, I think you all covered it. You know, you did a thorough job, you Anthony and Mary and yourself. And I would just say too, and maybe this is partially, you know, just kind of echoing what you all are saying, is that they do need to be thought out and they need to be specific and they need to be something that makes sense and that we can demonstrate and carry forward, especially if when we get into later stages, if we have 4F, for instance, because alternatives have to meet a purpose and need. And so that really is key when we're talking about 4F, especially too. So for, you know, non-historic bridge projects that involve other historic properties too. So just keep that in mind, and, you know, we'll work with you, you know, as you go. But usually what we see that purpose and need in the 106 is going to get forward in the NEPA and throughout. So it needs to be developed and well thought out. And I think Carrie has a comment, maybe. Carrie, or a question?
Yeah, no, I just so I just wanted to point out that I think it's important to note that although yes, maybe during the Section 106 process, the purpose and need statement isn't as refined as it's going to be later on when we get the NEPA document. However, there is a fine line there, right, between evaluating alternatives, specifically, you know, if it's a 4F situation that doesn't involve a historic bridge, or even if it does, if the purpose and need changes too much, you may need to go back and reevaluate some of the alternatives that may have been dismissed, or, you know, because they were meeting one purpose and need. And if that purpose and need develops you know, too much, then, you know, there may be cause to have to go back a little bit. So I just wanted to point that out. And if you guys have anything else to say on that, but
that's
yeah.
a good point, because we also want to avoid like moving the target. Like we're all, you know, we don't always, you know, you can't, if you keep moving the target, then what really, you know, that's not good through that process.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, you know, it really takes some you know, professional judgment to figure out, you know, the kind of what level of detail you might need depending on the project. But you are, you know, accepting the risk that you might have to go back and change something. I think, you know, when I was talking about, you know, just making sure the fundamentals are right, you know, part of that is just because we as an office have been pushing to get those ECLs out early in the process, you know, before we start doing an HPR or an archaeology report. So we don't necessarily want to hold that up. Now, you know, if you send out an ECL and you have the fundamentals of the purpose and need, Section 106 ECL with the fundamentals of the purpose and need that are sound generally, if something changes down the road, it's not going to be necessarily too hard to go back because all you've done is send out that one letter. You know, but maybe when we get to the HPR, when we get to the identification phase, and certainly when we get to a finding and move along in the process, you know, at every step we might need to keep on refining that to get a better better foundation of what the purpose and need is. And do we have Anu, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of add to what your discussion was and what Carrie and you have been talking. Just basically that we've been noticing, I guess, in more recent projects that consulting parties are getting more and more savvy about the purpose and need. So they have been asking questions about it, about why do we need to do this? So it's good to kind of at least have some of the basic answers, there before we send stuff out to them, because they're going to question it. We're seeing more of that.
Yeah, there can be, you know, we have savvy consulting parties, and you know, it has to make sense. They have to make sense.
Right. And you know,
Brandon had a comment also.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, reiterate Carrie's point that, during the NEPA process, we do look through the 106 process, and Anthony and Patrick and all of CRO knows that we'll come to them and ask them, hey, this doesn't sound like your project. And so when somebody makes a decision, whether it's during the NEPA or during or the cultural resources process, it's very well possible that you may have to step back because something has changed in the project. And when the purpose and need changes, you have to go back and you have to, what the regulations say is you have to go back and start from the beginning, but it's just to reevaluate to make certain that every step that you've taken along the way, do you need to update something? And so if there ends up being wide variation, you'll have a delayed project, and that's not something that we want. It's not something that, if it's an LPA, what those clients want. It's not what consultants want, because that's usually a lot of extra work, and if they may be held accountable for it too, and depending on what the contract is. So we're all in favor of trying to keep it so that you're all in the same scope.
Yeah. And in a basic sense, if you don't have a good purpose and need for your project, then that should be the starting point of project development, really. And there's a difference between building on that through the 106 process with more data and refinement versus going back and revising things. Other questions, comments?
Okay, I don't see any hands up.
Anything about, Mary, thank you so much for the historic bridge discussion. I'm sorry some people missed that, but her comments are available in the chat. I guess some people aren't able to access the chat, so we can post that or send that out later. Are there any other comments or questions about that, about the historic bridge analysis? And if not, we can move on, I guess, to the public hearing or public involvement discussion.
All right, thanks, Anthony. Again, I'm Patrick Carpenter. I'm a Section 106 specialist with CRO at INDOT. And again, thank you all for joining us, and we apologize for those people who were left waiting for a few minutes. But we do want to move on and talk a little bit about public involvement. We, in our COVID pandemic world, you know, it's kind of turned everything upside down, including how we do public involvement. And if you look in the chat, if you're able to access it, near the beginning of the conversation this morning, near the top, we did post the public involvement procedures that were put up by our public involvement office. And those are also available on the INDOT website. I think you can just Google INDOT public involvement. And so that lays out some of some procedures and processes for public involvement, and in part reflecting virtual, how we might do virtual also. I don't know, you know, to this point, how we have, or, you know, where we're at in navigating public hearings are virtually. And I know that, you know, we have some in the pipeline and are working on some. And so we do want to just touch base with where that process is and what people's experiences are. So Chad Costa was kind enough to share some experiences and where they're at in planning of a public hearing with some innovative ideas. So Chad, do you mind filling us in on your project there?
Sure. Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Chad.
So I'll jump over here and share my screen too as well, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's great.
So Lockmuller, by the way, Chad Costa, environmental manager with Lockmuller Group. We're currently working right now with the Greenfield District on a project in Portland, Indiana. And hang on a second, let me get switched over here. There we go. Working on a project right now in the Greenfield District. It's a diverse project. It involves a couple of different components. As you can see here on this map, it involves an HMA overlay. Nothing too earth-shattering with that, but right here through downtown Portland, there was a road diet component to it. It's about 6 blocks long, where there's going to be some traffic signals that were going to be removed, and parallel parking changed to back-in angled parking. And then also, so HMA overlay, road diet, and then also right here where that light blue dot is, that is a bridge rehab portion of the project. That bridge is a select historic bridge, crosses the Salamone River. We did have a public information meeting back in August of 2019, at which, and that was right at the onset of this project, at which we had, at that public information meeting, we had over 100 people in attendance. And there was definitely a lot of interest, specifically in regards to the road diet portion of the project. Fast forwarding from that point to spring of 2020, we were wrapping up the Section 106 effects finding, and then moving full bore on development of the level 4 categorical exclusion with a draft submittal date end of May. And then as Patrick alluded, you know, COVID happened, the state shuts down, INDOT Federal Highway indicated that no public hearings could be held until further guidance was issued. And then the state starts, the governor starts implementing a plan to gradually reopen the state. So, with those issues, we knew was coming, and we were trying to adjust accordingly. So what we did know is that INDOT had made a commitment to the city of Portland to deliver this project in 2021. So adjusting the schedule was not an option. It has to go to letting in February of 21. Because of the involvement with the select bridge, we knew a public hearing was going to be required. And even if that select bridge wasn't part of the project, the changing the functionality of the roadway, the road diet part of the project would have at least required an opportunity for a hearing, which, knowing what we encountered August of last year with the high level of interest, we knew we'd have to have a hearing anyways. And then we also knew that schools and municipal buildings were shut down. These types of venues are traditionally used for public hearings. And even if they were open, and some of them are starting to open back up, get ready for school, although that seems to be in flux still. There was still this concern about having 100 to 150 people inside an interior space, with stagnant airflow, and then also the pre and post sanitation processes that would sanitization processes that would be required either by us, the project team, or the hosting facility. So what we did to adjust our plan is in May, even before INDOT released their guidance, their supplemental guidance on public involvement with the virtual component supplement, we were looking for options to hold a hearing while trying to minimize exposure and spreading of COVID. So what we identified as a potential solution was an outdoor amphitheater. It's in a local park. It's about a half-mile away from the project area. I'll switch my screen over here to Google Earth. So this is US 27 through Portland. This is the project. This is Hudson Family Park. It's a city-owned park. And just doing a quick survey of the area one day, I identified this outdoor facility and said, hey, that outdoor amphitheater looks great as a possible venue for a public hearing once we get to that stage, and floated that idea past INDOT PM and then also past Ricky Clark, and both were very energetic about that prospect. So we moved forward with it as a possible venue. We confirmed with the city of Portland that we could indeed use this for the public hearing. Of course, they said, with COVID, there's nothing planned here all summer long. So the venue is completely ours to use. So with the venue secured, we turned to actual formulation of a plan following that supplemental guidance that INDOT and Federal Highway released at the end of May. So our plan, the concept for the plan, and I'll switch over to, let's see. The concept for the plan is quite simply, excuse me. The concept for the plan, the in-person part of the hearing, was simply keep people spread out. So we asked ourselves, in a normal hearing, what do we anticipate? And then we doubled it. We doubled the number of display areas. We doubled this number of sign-in tables, doubled the number of personnel that would be at the hearing, even doubled the number of screens for the hearing. But not just doubling it. As you can see here, this is our concept layout for the outdoor hearing. We also spread it out. We intentionally had 2 display areas associated with sign-in table number 1 over on the west side of the amphitheater field. And then we had another set of display areas around the concession stands / restroom. And then we called for these positions, these greeters, that after people came in and got registered through the sign-in table, the greeter would get them facilitated to the least occupied display area. This greeter here, of course, could facilitate them around either side of the building, depending on which one had the least people. The other thing that we propose as part of our plan, of course, is social distancing spots here at the sign-in table, then also across the field rows here. The city said that we could absolutely use surveyor's paint and apply 6-foot dots apart to encourage social distancing. And you can see here we have 2 assumed rows here in front, and then we had another 7 that got you back to here, which, we figured, this far back, we probably do need a second screen somewhere here in row 5. So, that's our basic line of thinking as we're looking at this outdoor venue. Also, of course, other factors, risk associated with an outdoor hearing is weather. So we do have an inclement weather date established, which would be a week after this. That date's going to be included in the notice once it does get published. And then also just the time of day, being able to see this screen, at a traditional time here in daylight savings territory, you're talking about, there could be a potential opportunity for glare and washout of the screen during the course of the presentation. Fortunately, this amphitheater is set up so that, this way is north. So the sunrise goes across the field. It doesn't go from back to front or front to back, which would be more opportunistic to creating those washouts and glares. But we're also proposing a later start time for the formal presentation. So hopefully temperatures are a little bit cooler and May the sun is set just a little bit more to allow a good field of vision for the presentation. The other thing that we're proposing as part of the virtual component, the supplemental virtual component of the hearing process, is we're going to make a pre-recorded narration of the presentation and make that available on INDOT's website prior to the legal notice getting published. So that will, give, and that's being done specifically for elderly and other at-risk members of the general population that may not be comfortable yet attending larger social gatherings. So that was the intent behind completing a pre-recorded narration of the presentation. As of today, we just got word that our draft plan was approved by Federal Highway Administration. This is something we've started coordination with Office of Public Involvement, Greenfield District, and Environmental Services Division back latter part of May, and even had a formal coordination meeting in June. We did have to make revisions to the plan latter part of June after the scope of the project changed, such that all the controversial parts of it were dropped. The road diet part of it dropped, and the HMA overlay dropped. Not that that was controversial, but basically everything but the bridge deck overlay dropped. So we're still moving forward at the hearing because, again, the project involves a select historic bridge, so we need to hold a hearing. It's just our plan's been revised even from this. It's been scaled back a little bit. Basically everything you see here, minus the sign-in tables, have been cut in half because we don't anticipate, now that the controversial elements have been removed, we don't anticipate the level of interest. We're no longer anticipating 100 to 150 people. Anticipate at worst 50, but could be as low as a dozen. We're assuming 50, so basically everything, all the social distancing will go through row 5. I doubt these backfields will be needed, but certainly available if necessary. It'll be an overflow area. And like I said, the presentation will be made available online where people can log on and actually listen to somebody narrating the presentation. So now that we have an approved hearing plan, we're excited to carry forward and execute this plan for what Ricky tells me is one of the first outdoor hearings. That's all I have, Patrick.
Oh, thank you very much, Chad. That was great, and really cool to see that. And I think we do have a comment or a question, Brandon.
Yeah, I was wondering if Chad could go into a discussion if there was not an outdoor option such as this amphitheater, how much consideration did you give to indoor locations?
It's interesting you say that. We did, our public information meeting, Brandon, was held at a place called the John Jay Community Service Center, which was I think undersized for the number of people that we had in attendance at the public information meeting. So after that, we definitely targeted the high school. Again, that was pre-COVID. We targeted the high school and other schools in the area. There's a middle school just it's actually right adjacent to US 27 there in downtown Portland on Water Street. That we did target these interior spaces. The high school, though, we found out later that it's going through renovation right now, so that was not available to us. Fortunately, though, by that time that was made known to us, we had identified this outdoor venue and ran it through the appropriate channels, the INDOT PM, Joanne Woolridge over there and Greenfield District, and Ricky Clark, and they all really liked this idea. So once we got that nod that this would be a great opportunity, we didn't continue that strong effort, Brandon, to identify a potential indoor venue. Certainly, if we would have, I think our plan would have been a little more stringent, a little more controlling. I think it's nice that having an outdoor venue, it gives a little more opportunity for people to spread out, keep airflow going. But you certainly do run into limiting circumstances such as the weather and, like I said, the time of day. But I don't know if that answered your question, but there was some thought given to indoor facilities. Just, nothing really jumped out, and we found this site and it became apparent that this would be our best opportunity, not knowing where the state's going to be once we're ready for the hearing. Not knowing where the state's going to be in its reopening plan, this just provided the best scenario.
Yeah, it pretty well answered the question. The biggest thing I wanted to point out for it was that this may continue on into colder months where doing outdoor venues may be more difficult.
Yeah.
And so just giving people ideas of what you thought about prior to actually securing the venue.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Does anybody else have any comments or questions that directly or for Chad for this project? All right. Well, thank you, Chad. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that was really cool. Does anybody have any questions or want to share experiences or what they're thinking about planning for their hearings, or any general observations or comments about public involvement in the pandemic world. I am going to post. So one of it's in the public involvement procedures is especially for INDOT, we have our website. So we do have project pages. So I'm going to post a link, an example link, so you can see what that looks like with the public hearing information. And so I'm going to send that now, and that's now in the chat room. And so that takes you to a page, public hearings page for an INDOT project, as an example.
It looks like maybe Carrie, you have your hand raised. You want to jump in here?
Yeah, I was just gonna state that, and just remind everyone that really for right now, it's going to be hard to find a one size fits all. It's going to be about your project. It's going to be about the number of people that you anticipate attending. And in the larger public involvement, that's sort of extending beyond cultural resources, that a lot of the people on the phone today also have to deal with. You also need to consider your EJ communities, and how what special accommodations may need to be made for those communities. So there's just a lot of nuances. So when we say, it depends when we're talking about NEPA or Section 106, yeah, it really depends right now when we're talking about how we're going to handle public involvement on these things. So I just wanted to emphasize that for everyone, is that there's just, unfortunately, there can't be like a one size fits all. This is going to fit every project. This is how we're going to do it from, for right now. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it sounds like too, a key component in this is early coordination with INDOT, with NEPA, ourselves, Ricky, then Federal Highway. Leave yourselves time for that coordination to figure out what the right plan is for your project.
Any other comments about public hearings? I think that your last comment, Patrick, I mean, that's kind of the key right now, and is early coordination. Everything, and like you said, Carrie, every project is going to be different. So.
Yep. So Anthony, you want to move on to the other questions that we've received, or from consultants?
Yeah, sure. So last time we talked about consulting related to public hearings, but not the same as consulting party meetings. We did receive a question about whether in some instances it would be okay to hold a consulting party meeting instead of having a Section 106 effects letter. So usually what we do is we have an effects letter that goes out, and then we have a consulting party meeting in the middle of that comment period for the effects letter. And so we do both. And on bigger projects, we might have more consulting party meetings than just that, but that's often the case. And so, it's an interesting question. I'll fall back on the old thing that we keep saying all the time, which is every project is different. So I don't know whether we can make a general rule. I do think that a few thoughts on this, and Anu, Patrick, feel free to jump in and correct me or add your own thoughts. But I would say that, it works well generally to do, effects letters and then consulting party meeting, because then you have all the info that people can review before the meeting. Whereas if you just had the meeting out of the blue, it might be hard because there wouldn't be any time to, for people to think about it. Now, I know it's uneven. Not all consulting parties take the time to go review that effects letter, but at least SHPO does, and other consulting parties do as well. We do have instances where we do an effects letter without a meeting, not so much a meeting without any sort of effects letter necessarily. Although we might have meetings in other cases where with bigger projects that aren't related to effects letters. But in any case, I have seen instances where I probably would say, maybe we don't need the level of detail in the effects letter in order to have the meeting. You don't necessarily have to have all of the information that you would eventually in an 811, but maybe you have basic information about the project, you attach plan sheets, and you go through some of the issues without, necessarily formally going through all of the examples of adverse effect or something like that. But again, it's project specific. What do you think, Patrick?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So maybe that the compromise is there that depending on the nature of the project, the type of consulting parties you have, the likelihood for controversy, that maybe, that effects letter could be more streamlined based on those factors. So if we think if we have a controversial project, or if your finding is there's that's one of those really hard, tough ones to crack, what the finding's going to be, and we really, so that, and it might be difficult to know what that finding's going to land without having that SHPO consulting party feedback. Maybe that effects letter is more detailed and more information is provided. So I think and we're not trying to get out of answering it, but it just, each project's different. So I think that's really depends on those factors and coordinating with your CRO reviewer. So I would touch base with the reviewer, like, hey, what do you expect? What do you recommend? And we can have that conversation. And so maybe there are compromises where that effects letter looks a little different depending on the situation.
Yeah. And I do think that, like, one of the advantages, remember, of having a detailed effects letter is it makes the 811 way easier, because assuming not too much changes, you're going to be able to copy and paste a lot of that information from the effects letter straight into the 811. So, it might take a little more time now, but it should save you time later. So that, I do think, though, that, these days, as we're having more virtual meetings, it is true that I have seen on a few projects that meetings are being, relatively well attended, because it doesn't take people getting up and going out of their house to go to a meeting. So I do understand, like, that, maybe meetings could be a really good way of getting people involved, and not everyone goes and reads the detailed letters. I think we do have a comment from Mary. You want to jump in?
Sure. So I know we kind of discussed this last time a little bit, and I think we've discussed it maybe a little bit internally about, even when we get to a point where we're not operating in a pandemic world, how much are we still going to be using Teams, and do we want to still keep using it? Even if we can have an in-person consulting party meeting, do we want to do away with that option or still provide that option? And things to think about moving forward. So I had a consulting party meeting this morning, and there was a consulting party on it who in years past have been very active from time to time, but I hadn't really heard a lot from in more recent years, and was in this meeting and really said, I like this format. This is great. This makes it easy to participate, and you can record the meeting, and a consulting party who couldn't be here can watch it. And so I don't know if that was the difference in him being able to participate today specifically or not, but the input that was provided was very important and very good input, and I'm glad that he was able to participate today. So I think he was pretty kind of advocating. He mentioned, I think this is a good format for you all to use, and I like this availability, more kind of almost more availability here, with the teams. So I think, that's just something to keep in mind moving forward. And I would appreciate, as people go through their projects, when they receive input one way or another, just letting us know so that we kind of know moving forward how we want to keep doing things and, make sure we're still addressing consulting parties' needs.
That's a good point. As we've got more experience with virtual consulting party meetings, I do think that I have been surprised about how enthusiastic people seem to be about them and how well they have worked. And so I would say in the future, maybe in the future we explore hybrid approaches. But so far, I think the virtuals they're easy to, you can be in your pajamas and, join in, so, I think that's helpful. But I think, Brandon, you had a question, comment?
Just something to follow up that you guys were talking about. I know with Federal Highway and INDOT, we all don't think of public involvement as a bad thing. The more people that we can get involved, it's a good thing. So just remember that it may involve some additional work, but at least you can get a better product hopefully out to the customers.
Well, and one thing that's been on our minds recently and in the past, that ends up happening is, we fear having someone come out of the woodwork towards the end later, right? We want to get those people involved earlier so that, the concerns are raised now. We want to demonstrate that we've made an effort to, to involve people early on so that, at the 11th hour, we don't have some crisis.
Yeah, that's exactly right. The more people we can reach, the better. And the easier we can make it, the better. Did we have any other comments or about consulting party meetings or experiences people want to share? We talked a lot about last time, but we've had more since then in the last month, and I'm sure some people might have something to share about it. I think Christina had a comment earlier, suggestion of, and I think maybe this is on that, those outreach and getting people's like WFY, or local access channels and different avenues. So I think this will really force us this time to really get creative and maybe adopt these practices long term, which is cool, which is great. Linda, we see you. Did you have a comment?
I do have a comment. I think one of the challenges of doing a Zoom meeting is not everybody shows their face on a Zoom meeting. And when you're a moderator, you read their faces and their body language to understand whether they have concerns. So I found that to be a real challenge with it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you don't know what sees people's reactions. Yeah,
I think that's a general. Yeah. That's a problem that really extends to so many aspects of our lives right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, yeah. There's no good answer to that, but other than
what to do about it.
Yeah. And I think that, and I think too long term. I mean, I think we do have to look at, sometimes Zoom meeting. Right now, Zoom meetings are more Zoom meetings are more a necessity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But long term, maybe there are certain meetings that you got to be in person. You got to be on site. You got to see people. You got to meet them. You never met them before. Like consulting parties, you never met them before. Having that one-on-one, face-to-face contact is really important. Maybe other projects, consulting parties, meetings, it's not as important, not controversial. It's the third one in a project. And maybe we can explore, can you do both? Can you be in person and, can we do that? So
I find it especially hard with John Carr because I can look at him and get a sense of what he's thinking. And he will not put his face on that screen. And I've tried to talk him into doing it, and he won't do it. So.
Yeah, maybe we should have prizes or, motive,
Yeah, what do you say?
Awards for participation, visual participation. All right, yeah, that's a good point. Thanks, Linda. Anybody else?
Yeah, this is Mary again. I'll just echo that it is hard sometimes to get the participation. In the meeting today, where we did have the party who provided a lot of input, he was kind of quiet at first. So we had to kind of probe a little bit of like, well, what do people think about this? And do people have any comments? And once we kind of got him going, then, he started telling us more. So there is sometimes some dead air there that you've got to kind of say, all right, I'm going to pick somebody to call on and kind of put him on the hot seat to try to get some comments.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And, hopefully, I mean, maybe, as people get more used to these formats, it will, conversation will loosen up a little bit and people will be more comfortable. And hopefully we won't have as many technical glitches in the future as with this.
Yeah, I will do. We've kind of touched on it maybe last time and a little bit on this time. I think Carrie kind of brought it up with, environmental justice stuff too, is that, we also have to be mindful of who our audience is and who's participating. And the point of the virtual, now it's, it's a necessity, but we don't want to use it that in a way that limits people's participation. So we do want to, reach out to people, get that input. Can you attend these meetings online? Do you have access to a computer? Is this something that is workable? And so we do want to be mindful of that because we don't want to exclude anybody from the process who doesn't have the technology or the equipment or just comfort level with doing it. So we want to keep that in mind as we move forward also.
Totally agree. Yep. Well, if we can move on, we wanted to give you guys an update. Some of you might have heard, but there is some space reorganization going on at INDOT Central Office. And so we just want to let, get the word out that we are going to be dealing with a lot of issues over the next couple weeks having to do with that, reconfiguration of our office space. And so we're going to ask people to be patient with us a little bit. We might have some hiccups that are related both to just the time it will take to, be moving stuff around and reorganizing things physically. And then also we might have some extra technological challenges over the next couple weeks. So there might be some increase in our review turnaround times. And we just want people to be aware of that right now. So does that kind of cover the base, you think, Patrick, in terms of that issue?
Yeah, right. Just be patient with us.
Yeah.
We're going through a lot of changes.
Yeah, things are changing pretty quickly. So
yeah. We are also on the brown bags. We're keeping a running list of topics that people bring up in between meetings, and so we will try to get to those. Maybe we have a list, so please send us more topics we can discuss, and we'll try to incorporate those. And this time we didn't have time for a lot of extra, but we'll try to keep those listed. Maybe one time it's just a random, just all these random things that people have asked us about, and that's okay too. So, but does anybody have any, while we're on here, our last few minutes, have any questions or comments or anything that we can talk about real quick?
just while people, and feel free to, in our final minutes, jump in and throw something out. But I see that I quickly skipped over a couple quick advertisements, future ideas for brown bags that we're going to cover. I know bump outs is a big topic. I know that you know, from a pedestrian safety viewpoint, they're really appealing, and sometimes in the past there have been issues around what that means for Section 106. So we'd be happy to talk about bump outs within historic districts under Section 106 is one potential topic. And then another potential topic, which we've talked about before, is another update on post-World War II housing, potential historic districts. I spoke at Road School right before this whole thing started, and then since then we've kind of been blindsided by all the changes that have been going on. But I think, you know, our office is still thinking about that. We have been working on that issue, and so we want to bring updates to you all in the near future. So please contact us with other potential topic ideas.
Yep. Yeah, we do this. Our idea for the brown bag was to share information and kind of build our community, you know, our 106 community and people who are involved in 106. And so we want it to be useful and informative and in a casual atmosphere, you know, informal atmosphere. So we welcome any ideas and suggestions in that regard. Well, anybody else? Anything? Well, it was good. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, feel free to email me and or Patrick anytime with feedback on how this went, topics, questions, whatever.
Yeah, and let us know if this time works. You know, we kind of did it around the lunchtime. We thought we'd capture some people, but let us know if any suggestions of time, you know, anything like that too. So, well.
All right.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks.
We appreciate your time. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you. Do the same.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.